Days after countless North Korean soldiers surged across the border into South Korea, the fragile balance on the peninsula collapsed almost overnight. President Harry S. Truman, confronted with the sudden eruption of a full-scale war, urged the Pentagon to take whatever steps were necessary to assist the embattled capitalist ally in the Far East. The Northern forces, equipped with Soviet-supplied T-34 tanks and supported by Yak fighters and Sturmovik ground attack aircraft, cut through the unprepared southern defenses with devastating speed, adding to the chaos. Small boats from the North Korean People's Army slipped soldiers onto the South Korean shoreline, sowing confusion and tightening the noose around the Republic of Korea. The southern forces, undertrained and under-equipped, collapsed in the face of this relentless onslaught. From nearby bases in Japan, American air and naval forces quickly moved to intervene, sending aircraft to strike northern positions and deploying warships to provide support. Yet the reality on the ground was sobering. It was nearly impossible to land sufficient American or Allied troops on South Korean soil before the advancing armies from the north threatened to swallow the entire peninsula. The desperate situation left the defenders with only one hope. The port city of Busan, in the far southeast, offered a position where resistance might hold until reinforcements could arrive. If that city fell, the war would be lost before it had truly begun. What stood in the way of that disaster, on the very first night of the invasion, was a single, modest patrol boat whose actions would prove decisive in safeguarding the crucial harbor. The Republic of Korea had been struggling with profound economic weakness since achieving independence from the Nippon Empire at the close of World War II. The nation possessed little in the way of natural resources, and even fewer financial reserves. These difficulties were mirrored in its navy, which was a navy in name more than in reality. The Republic of Korea Navy was left to scrape by with small landing craft, personnel carriers, and lightly built wooden patrol boats, wholly unsuited for modern warfare. Admiral Sun Wolil, the first chief of naval operations, understood that without proper ships, the Navy would never be able to defend the nation's coasts, let alone contribute to the defense of the state in time of war. He emphasized again and again the urgent need to acquire modern vessels. Yet there was no outside help forthcoming, and the government had no funds to spare. The sailors would have to act for themselves. In June of 1949, the Navy created what it called the Vessel Construction Finance Committee. Every sailor, from the highest-ranking officer down to the youngest cadet, was invited to contribute between 5 and 10% of his salary. Many did so, despite the financial strain. Others went further. Midshipmen gathered and sold scrap metal to raise funds, while the wives of naval personnel took in laundry and sewing to supplement the effort. After 4 months of sacrifice, the Navy had raised $15,000. A pitiful sum when measured against the cost of a proper warship, yet a striking demonstration of the service's resolve. The effort did not go unnoticed. The South Korean government, moved by the determination of its Navy, supplemented the collection with $45,000. Together, the sailors and the state had gathered $60,000, enough to attempt the bold step of acquiring a real vessel. The ship chosen was no ordinary craft. She had once served the United States Navy as USS PC-823, later renamed Ensign Whitehead, while serving as a training ship for the United States Merchant Marine Academy. USS PC-823 had been at PC for 6-1 class. Submarine chaser, laid down on June 2, 1943, at the Latham D. Smith Shipbuilding Company in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. She was launched in January 1944 and commissioned into service later that year. During the waning years of World War II, she had been assigned to the Western Atlantic, where she took part in air-sea rescue duties and patrol missions meant to secure Allied shipping lanes. Her wartime service was steady rather than dramatic, and by early 1946 she was decommissioned, considered surplus in the new atomic age. She was handed over to the United States Maritime Commission and 2 years later transferred to the Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York, where she became a training ship under the name Ensign Whitehead. Removed from the official Navy list, she seemed destined to spend her final years as little more than a classroom on the water. Yet history had other plans. In September 1949, the Republic of Korea Navy acquired her, paying out the sum it had struggled so hard to collect. At 52 meters in length, she was far larger and more capable than anything else in the South Korean fleet. She was renamed ROKS Baekdusan, with the hull number PC-701. 15 South Korean officers traveled to the United States to begin the arduous work of restoring the ship. She was in dreadful condition, worn down by years of use and neglect, so much so that some described her as nothing more than a floating engine inside a hull. Still, the officers devoted themselves to the task. For 2 months they labored, repairing her systems and restoring her seaworthiness. Slowly but surely, the Navy's first true ocean-going vessel came to life. When at last she was ready, Baekdusan departed New York and steamed toward the Pacific. At the Hawaii Naval Station she was equipped with a 3-inch main deck gun, providing her with the firepower her sailors desperately needed. From there she moved on to Guam, where the Navy made a modest purchase of less than 100 shells. It was barely enough to allow the crew to train in firing the gun, but it represented a beginning. With Baekdusan, the Republic of Korea Navy had transformed itself from a fleet of fragile wooden craft into a force that, however small, possessed the potential to stand against its enemies. She was not simply a ship. She was the product of sacrifice, the symbol of a nation's determination to survive. And soon, she would be called upon to prove her worth in the crucible of war. At last, the ship arrived in South Korea, reaching Jinhae Naval Base on April 10, 1950, barely 2 months before the outbreak of the Korean War. On the dawn of Sunday, June 25, 1950, tensions along the 38th parallel erupted into open warfare. There had been earlier clashes along the border, some started by the South and even sporadic rebellions inside South Korea, but the competing claims by the government in Seoul and the regime in Pyongyang to be the sole legitimate ruler of a united Korea made a larger conflict almost inevitable. The temporary border had become the battlefield. Soon the Korean People's Army crossed the 38th parallel, justifying the assault by alleging that Republic of Korea forces had struck first, and even claiming they were on a mission to arrest and execute what they called a bandit and traitor, South Korean President Syngman Rhee. In fact, neither the CIA nor the United Nations anticipated a full-scale invasion, misreading North Korean troop movements as defensive maneuvers. As General William Lynn Roberts, commander of the Korean Military Advisory Group, put it, any North Korean invasion would merely provide South Korean trainees with target practice. When invasion did come, it arrived on a massive scale. The North was armed by the Soviets and bolstered by veteran fighters with experience from the Chinese People's Liberation Army, and its troops had undergone rigorous training that gave them a clear edge over their southern neighbors. At the outbreak, the North Korean army numbered as many as 200,000 troops arranged into roughly 10 infantry divisions, a tank division, and an Air Force division, not counting reserves and equipment. The South Korean military was ill-prepared and poorly equipped by comparison. Both navies were small, and sea power would soon play a critical role as floating artillery in support of ground operations. The little, crowd-funded ship the ROKN had bought for $60,000 would prove, as military analyst Sebastian Roblin observed, one of the most timely and cost-efficient investments in naval history. During a late-night patrol stretching into the early hours of June 26th, less than 24 hours after the invasion began, Captain Nam Choi commanded the subchaser Baekdusan along the eastern coast, watching for infiltrators. Abruptly, an unidentified vessel appeared on the horizon, about 20 miles from the vital harbor of Busan, which was then in a precarious state of readiness. Baekdusan challenged the unknown ship with signal lights. There was no reply. When the chaser swung its searchlights onto the intruder, the crew saw a 1,000-ton steam merchant freighter crammed with an estimated 600 to 1,000 soldiers from the North Korean 766th Infantry Regiment. Machine guns mounted on the freighter opened up, hitting the sub-chaser's bridge, killing the helmsman and wounding another crew member. Baekdusan returned fire and engaged the steamer in a short, desperate duel as the freighter tried to flee north. To increase accuracy and penetration, the defenders closed to within roughly 400 meters, and the ship's newly installed 3-inch gun was fired in anger for the first time. When the chaser's 3-inch gun and 6.50 caliber machine guns cut loose, many of the North Korean soldiers on deck threw themselves overboard to avoid the blast, and then tried to swim for the sub-chaser in an attempt to swarm it. The crew repelled the would-be boarders with semi-automatic M1 Garand rifles, preventing the chaser from being taken. The combined weight of the Baekdusan's fire ultimately sent the freighter to the bottom between Busan and Tsushima Island. That clash became the Republic of Korea Navy's first modern naval engagement, remembered as the Battle of Korea Strait. The steamer had once been a U.S. vessel and had been purchased for service with the Korean People's Navy by sympathizers of the communist regime. In the chaos of war, she arrived as an enemy transport. After her dramatic role in the Korea Strait action, Baekdusan continued to serve through the war, including participation in the Incheon landing. After the conflict, she was retired and eventually broken up, but her record left a lasting legacy. Had the PC-701 not been nearby, and her crew not fought so fiercely despite limited training, Busan might well have been captured, with more than 600 troops on that freighter. The North Koreans could have established a foothold at the virtually undefended port, and altered the course of the campaign irreparably. For the rest of the war, Busan remained the last foothold for the South Koreans and their United Nations allies on the peninsula. And many historians argue that the single naval action on the first night helped prevent the fall of South Korea to communist control. As Roblin wrote, but for a small crowd-funded patrol ship with a single 3-inch deck gun, South Korea as we know it today might simply not exist. Thank you for watching our video. Don't miss more epic encounters from modern history by subscribing to the Black Vault and the rest of our Black Documentaries channels. Show your support by hitting the like button and clicking the bell icon to be notified of our latest content. Stay tuned.